Welcome to Tammy's Knitting Podcast. I am Tammy. Today is part 2 of our sock tubes for dummies. And I say that with me in mind because this is something I wish I would have had when I was trying to figure out sock tubes. So I'm just trying to take what I learned in sock tubes, cutting up sock tubes and putting it out there so that people who want to learn how to do sock tubes and deal with sock tubes can understand how to do this. Okay, so today's part 2 is measuring and marking our tube for the size sock that we want. Okay, so as I have, this is definitely a sock tube. This one is one that I've already cut one time already. And this is half of the sock tube that I got. I cut it in half. Now let's talk a little bit about cutting the sock tube. When I first got my sock tubes, I had said I never cut into my knitting, never did an afterthought heel. Didn't think it was going to be a big deal, but it was very nerve-wracking for me to cut my knit. I was petrified. I'm like, I don't want to cut my knit. It takes me so long to do it. Why would I cut it? And I watched a lot of videos to figure out how to do this. And like I said before, I will put some videos, link them down in the bottom of videos that I've used to that have helped me, that might help you, and some PDFs and stuff like that that I have used that I think that were helpful for me, and hopefully they will help you. But one of the things for cutting a sock tube, when I did my first original tube, like one of these that are full length, first thing I did, because I didn't have very many needles. And that's another thing I want to kind of talk about with is needles. There's a lot of different needles out there that things you can use. One of the things I ended up getting, I got a couple of different things. Let me grab right here. Where are they? So I ended up getting from Temu, I think it was, and they were just zeros, like little flexi flips. And I thought, these would be great. And I got 4 or 5 of them. They were only like $2 for 4 needles or something like that. It was very, very cheap. And I thought, you know what? This will be nice to be able to pick up my stitches and hold them on there. And it does, if you don't have to pick up in between and cut. The needles tend to put tension on the stitches, and it's really hard to pick up. And in 3, I'll show you what I'm talking about when I say that. But it does now, like to pick up these stitches here, these would be perfect. Pick them up, put one on each side, and have your stitches there. But when you're going to pick up here in the middle where you need to cut the yarn in between, it's a little hard to do that with these. So I bought a bunch of these thinking they would be what I wanted. They weren't quite what I wanted. They work, but I still struggled. The next thing I was told by Tammy, who Red's Lady Creates, she told me to get these, and they're from Clover, and I ended up getting them on Amazon. Sometimes they're in the stores, but we don't have, once Joann's closed and they didn't really carry a lot of extra knitting supplies, we don't have a yarn store that carried a specific knitting stuff. So I got these on Amazon, and they're good for sleeves or anything else. So it's not like I won't use them, but the needle is really small. And I struggled with that as well, trying to pick up. It wasn't smooth for me. So that was another thing I bought and I didn't end up using. The next thing that I ended up getting is and I had bought these a while ago, and they are the ChiaoGoo 1 minis. So they're a size 1 needle, but the cord is mini. It's a lot thinner than a normal red lace cord. The mini cord is thinner. This worked the best for me. This was where I was able to pick up the stitches because the needle is long enough. I was almost able to go, well, I was able to go all the way through it before I had to pull my stitches through. And then I was able to use the cord to hold my needles and then use the other end of the needle itself to pick up the other row of stitches, one below it. And that worked really good for me. So these ended up being interchangeable needles that I ended up getting with the mini cord on them. So I ended up getting quite a few of these. So I have like 5 of them now. When I went on the yarn crawl, one of the things that I didn't really need yarn, and I thought, you know what, if I go to a store that has Chow-Gu needles and they have, even if they have the minis that are fixed, that's great. But if they have some that are cords and needles themselves, so I ended up getting 2 more sets of these, which now gives me, I think, 6 sets of size 1 needles to be able to do a sock tube. So my first thing, what I ended up doing, what I did to, and this helped me learn how to cut, and there was no thinking involved. I told you before, they give you a size, how many rows. All I did was I took my tape measure and I measured the length of my tube. And then I divided it in half. And I found my center. And I marked it. Picked up 1 stitch and marked where my center was. Marked that. The other thing that you want to do when you're doing a sock tube is mark your top. So if you're going to use this as the top of your sock tube, mark it here that this is the top. And also, when you cut, mark this as your top so that you don't turn around and put this as your top and you have it wouldn't matter as long as the next sock, everything goes the same way. But if you're cutting them in half and you're making 1 sock here, 1 sock here, you want them both to go the same way. So you need to make sure you mark the top of your sock. So what I did, once I'd marked my halfway point, put a marker in there, marked the top of this. And actually, I really didn't have to mark the top of it, but I did put a mark here because where I cast on. And I picked up all these stitches so that I wouldn't forget what was the top of my sock tube. I knit my cuff. But at that time, I did not have 6 sets of needles. If I cut this in half, I needed 2 sets of needles when I cut this in half. And I only had 2. So I couldn't have 1 set up here. So I ended up picking up these stitches, putting them on the needles, and knitting my cuff. Now I know where the top of my sock is, but I still kept a mark here so that I knew where the back of it was, where I was going to put my heel. That is where I tied in all of my, I joined all of my yarn is on the back of it, so it wasn't on the front of the foot. So I marked it as the back. Then I came down here and I picked up my row of stitches all the way across. And halfway through, when I got part way, I would adjust. And I guess I got to do this sitting down, but I would adjust, and I'll show you when I go to measure them out. And I would adjust it a little bit so that I could get the needle past the halfway point and then pull it through part way, because I needed to be able to pick up the other, or pull it all the way through, but not through the stitches on the other side, so that I could pick up the correct row. It really took me a little bit of time getting the full row. And then skip a row and then pick up the next row. Then I was able to cut. But my sock tubes were cut in half. And then once those halves were done, those were cut in half, and I made a toe and a cuff on each one of those halves. And this is what I have here, is a toe and a cuff on each one of those halves. But I made sure I added my cuff and then my toe. So once I have a cuff here and I cut it in half to get so that I could use this needle again, because now this one's stuck in this other half. To use this needle again, I did my toe. Then I had to cut again. So, if this was going to be the top of my sock, I did this so that I had my needle again, and I did a cuff. And you could leave this because this is the way it came. So this is okay until you need it. But I had a cuff on that. So I knew the way my tube went. So I always had my tube going the same way. It's not that big of a deal, but your stitches will go one way or the other. You'll see the difference. I didn't think you would until I did it one time, and I was like, oh, well, one sock, the V's go down, and one sock, the V's go up. So one's like this, one's like this. Does it really matter? Probably not. Nobody's going to look at them, and it's a sock for me. But it's one thing to keep in mind to make sure that you mark them. And by adding your cuff, you're just taking one step out of the process. That it's one less thing that you have to do. Once you pick these up, and you don't have to cut that, you can pick these up, knit your cuff. Then you can divide these and knit your toe. And if you need the needle, knit your cuff. If you don't need the needle, leave it on that needle and go back to dividing what you wanted. Okay, so that's how I ended up working the sock tubes. So let's actually get into, I've got to figure out how I'm going to position my camera so that you guys can see what I'm showing you on my little table here. So let me get the camera going and I will get back to you. Okay, so you'll need a tape measure to be able to measure your sock tube. Excuse me. And then you will need some light bulb stitch markers. I've got 3 here. I don't think I'm going to need more than that. And there is a couple of things you need to know when you first go to doing a sock tube. First off, you need to know how long of a cuff you want, a leg you want on your sock. Now, most of the time I do a short sock where I have just a 2, maybe 3-inch cuff, leg. Let's see how long this leg is. That is 2 1/4. So usually I do 2. It just happened to be I was trying to use up most of this yarn and I went a little bit longer, but I didn't want to go too long so that I didn't have my toe enough to do the foot of the sock. So usually I do 2 inches. So 2 inches, I'm going to need 2 inches for my leg. So let's measure out 2 inches from our here. So 2 inches. So that is right here, right at the end of this green one here. And sometimes it's hard to pick up just one stitch, but it doesn't really matter. I just wanted to get one side of it. I don't need to get both sides. Okay, so that is my leg. Now, I have put a PDF in the description down below, and that is to figure out the length of the foot that you need. Now, with socks for yourself, and this is going to be something you're going to want to write down, have index cards set for everybody that you're making socks for so that you know what size foot it is. Once you figure out the shoe size and the size sock that you need to make and you write it down, the foot size is not going to change for that person. What's going to change is the length of your leg that you want for your leg. Whether you want a 3-inch leg, a 4-inch leg, a 5-inch leg, that's what's going to change the most. Now, I have a chart down in the description that is from Liftbridge, and it is a bunch of sock tube knitting socks from sock tubes, and it's a bunch of information that they have given, and it is very good information. I used a lot of it, and I still to this day use the sizing chart that they give you, and I'm going to put that in front of the camera here. So this is the sizing chart that they give you. This is women's, this is men's. So you go over here to your US size and you figure out what size foot. Now I have about a 7.5. My foot length is 9.5. Foot inches is 9.5. Inches between the toe and the heel is 5.8, and that's an exact fit. But when you're making socks, you really want to do a 10% negative ease. You want the socks to be a little bit tight because the more you wear them, the more they stretch. And if you're wearing them in shoes, they're going to get looser as you wear them. And those of you who know that knit socks, you don't wash your knit socks every time you wear them. You wear them multiple times. So the first time they fit fine, but the second time you put them on, they're a little too big because they're already stretched out because you made them to fit your foot correctly. And now there's no negative ease. So you want to do a 10% negative ease. So my size would be a 5.2. And 5.2 is, I'm 5.2, 5.1. I'm probably going to end up just going to a 5, maybe 5.1. We'll see. I want to see my sock tube if I can get more than 2 pairs or get 2 pairs of socks out of what is left here. So 5 inches, if I say 5 inches that I need for my foot. So 5 plus my 2 is 7 inches. So I need from here, I need to go 7 inches is where I need to cut. So right at the top of this line is where I'm going to put this thing. So I need 7 inches for a sock. Okay. So let's see if we can get where we're going to have another 7 inches. Oh, right here. Are we going to get 3 7 inches? Nope. We're not going to get 3 7 inches out of this because we only have 5 inches left after that. Now, if I want to get 2 pairs of socks out of this, I can absolutely cut my leg to only 1 inch. And then I would only need 6 inches. And I would most likely be able to have enough to do, because I had 5 inches. So that's probably what I'm going to end up doing is putting an inch or maybe an inch and a half. I need to, now that I know how many inches I need, I can measure my sock tube and then divide it by that many inches to see how many socks I can get out of there. I know my foot needs 5 inches and then however long I need for my leg. But that is, so that's how you measure your foot. Know how long. So now, I can put an index card with my information on it and I can say, okay, for my size foot, if I'm going to do a shorty sock, which this is not really a shorty sock. It is, but a lot of my socks are even shorter than, usually I just do an inch. And then I have an inch ribbing. So I have a total of 2 inches at the top. So I might do an inch and a half. Figure out do an inch and a half. I only did 2 inches, right? Yeah, I did 2 inches. So I might do an inch and a half, cut it up an inch, a half inch. Okay, let's use this pink one here. So we're going to mark it here. So it's an inch and a half. And then I need, so an inch and a half and 5 is 6.5 inches. So we are here. Okay, let's take this one out so we don't get confused to what we're doing. Okay, so 6.5, we'll write it here. 6.5. Yeah, we have 6. So, I mean, we could make this work because we could add a little of a little more of a leg on to one of these, or these ones we could just divide a little bit more. But yeah, so that is how I figure out. I'm now doing the math on a sock tube to figure it out. But this thing from Liftbridge really does help to figure out, especially if you're making socks for other people and you don't know, you only know their shoe size. This is a good this is a good way to make a sock that should fit them. So that you don't have to worry about, having them try them on multiple times. Okay. But yeah, this PDF will be down below so that you guys can print this out. I've used this a number of times. It is a very good, a lot of information, and it does help you. And this is also what you would use to figure out from your, once you have your toe on and you have to cut in for your heel. That is where you want to figure out for your heel as well. That would be, once your toe is on, you're going to mark those many stitches 5 inches up. So from here, this is where we would have our toe put. So we got to go 5 inches up. I am right. So 5 inches, I marked where we would start. This is how long our cuff would be. So our heel is going to start right here. So we would take out a half a row here to do our heel. So we'd only have a little bit up here on our sock. Yeah, and it looks funny when you do it and you start it. It's like, really? That's not that much. But when you think about it, they're really not that long. I mean, these socks, when I measure them from there to there, let's measure. This is a pair that I knit at a time, but that's 8 inches. Now this is a 2.5 inch leg. So that's 8 inches on the front of the sock. And that's about right when you figure out where my foot was. Figure I have a 5-inch foot. Yeah, that's where my heel started getting put in. Turning for the heel. So, but hopefully this has helped you guys to understand figuring out a sock tube, knowing how to cut it. It's very informative to have, a PDF or something that you can have in front of you to know what length you need. I didn't make it more difficult for you guys. I hope I made it easier for you guys to understand as far as working with a sock tube and trying to figure out how to cut your sock tube. The next video is going to be picking up our stitches and making our cuts so that we can cut our sock tube, and then also getting the other sock tube cut as well so that we have all of our sizes cut. And that's where all the extra needles will come into play, to be able to just hold them onto needles so that we don't have to worry about it once we have them. But the next ones will get put on these little flexi flips just to hold the stitches so that I can show you guys what all we want to do with this. But that is going to be it for today's video. Like I said, all the videos that I've talked about, the lift bridge video for knitting socks from a sock tube, Jenny, I believe it's Geigley, for how cranking a sock tube, cutting the whole process of from cranking a sock tube to making a sock. That video will be linked down below. And then also Kirby Wirby's video for an Afterthought heel, to show you how not to get holes in your Afterthought heel. So those are some of the videos that are going to be linked down below. But that is going to be it for today's video. I will talk to you guys on part 3. Hope you have a good day. Bye.